This is Lorin.
This is Jenny.
And this is Matt. And you're listening to Discography Discussion.
I had to hit a button. It's Skype. There's a button.
See, I love Skype video, but like Skype audio is cool, but it's awkward because you never know if the other person's like really into what you're talking about or not.
Well, I'm going to warn you right now. I always look like I'm not into whatever's happening, so don't take it personally.
Oh, I usually do, so no.
All right. Well, you can get sad if you want to, but it's just my face.
I might be down here
good.
just staring off into space and be like, is he actually paying attention?
Well, we don't have too much on the old plate tonight. We actually have a third host as well, but he had a work emergency. And like maybe at some point during the conversation, he'll come running in the door and throw on a pair of headphones. But
I promise he'll be wearing pants if that happens.
yeah, I'm not holding out. Okay. I'm not holding out on that. So the reason we called you guys tonight was because, first of all, big fan.
Thank you.
I started listening to the Roach Koach podcast, I guess a little bit before we did our episode on nu metal with we did ours with Joshua Toomey, which was the first time we ever talked to him. And after the stuff that I said about Pantera, maybe the last time. But I used it more or less to kind of prep up because it had been years since I discussed that topic. And, I became a really big fan of the show over time because like literally everything I listened to, pretty much all through high school, a little bit of middle school. And even though a lot of those albums may seem cringeworthy now, I found it really interesting that like, wow, these guys are listening to it and actually just like, is this good? Isn't this good? Like, there's not like a nostalgia attachment to it. And I found that really interesting. And, usually people that like our show, they were like, hey, we listen to your, what else is out there that's like what you guys are doing? And almost every single time I'm like, dude, you guys got to check out the Roach Koach. And the reason is because I was like, it's very similar to what we do, except they have a more micro style of review, whereas ours is more macro. So we'll cover a band from the beginning of their career all the way through the end. So even if they have a couple of stinker albums, we might still praise the band. Whereas on your guys' end, first of all, you guys are never going to run out of material. Whereas we might after a little while. So
after all, nu metal is making a comeback, so
I know
you guys are set for life.
Yeah,
on trend somehow.
I feel like if we tried to do one band, our episode would be a day.
Oh, God.
One day long if we tried to do the whole life of a band.
Oh, God, yeah.
So I applaud you.
That's because you take every album track by track. What do we try to keep it under, Joe? Like 20, 25 minutes? I know we've gone like...
Oh, we try to keep it to at least 25 hours or less. Because you could go on track by track for some of these bands.
Right.
This is how I know how excited he is to talk to you guys, because the only time he really fans out, he forgets to introduce himself.
Oh, yeah. So, hi, I'm Dan. I'm the host of the Discography Discussion podcast.
You're the only host now?
Joe is the co-host / engineer. And the
How's it going,
empty chair over there is Jeff.
So do you want to tell everybody who our guests are tonight?
Yes, tonight we have our guests from the Roach Koach podcast. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves or you want me to?
We can introduce ourselves. That's fine.
Lorin, do it up. Do it regular style.
Yeah, man.
I'll do it regular style. My name is Lorin Kozlowski. With me, as always, the original Roach Rider, Mr. Matt Naas, and the Indigo Angel, Jennifer Bloomer.
Hello.
Good evening, everybody, from the Roach Koach podcast.
You made it extra crispy there. You usually do Jenny first and then me.
Wow.
That's because normally, I swear, it's so funny. We do it every week. I always write it down and read it. From my radio days, I would always write down stuff. Even if it's like, oh, it's your name, I write my name down because you can trip over anything. It's insane. So
Absolutely.
yeah, in this moment, I was like, what do I normally say? Oh, I introduce everybody. What's everybody's names? I don't remember. So
well, I feel deeply disrespected, and I will carry that chip on my shoulder.
Is this going to bleed over into your next episode? Am I going to hear some serious hate headed his way?
Yeah. I mean, at this point, you've tipped me.
She's not going to forgive you easily, man. And if you believe the new metal canon is an actual canon, then you are ready for this episode of Discography Discussion. I am Joe, that is Dan, and we have been infested by Lorin, Jennifer, and Matt of the Roach Koach podcast. Before we get into that, I want to take some time to say thank you to everyone for listening and for subscribing. If you are not a subscriber, you can find everything Discography Discussion at Discussmetal.com. We are on Google Play. We are on iTunes. We are on Stitcher. We are on TuneIn Radio. So if you have an Amazon Echo product, you can say to it, Alexa, play the latest episode of Discography Discussion, and she will. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter at Discussmetal. Be sure to like, favorite, and subscribe. It really helps us out. It lets us know you're listening. It's time for Discussmetal.com versus the Roach Koach podcast. Enjoy.
Hey you. Do you like the Tales from the Crypt series? Do you like spooky things in general? Then check out the Good Evening Kitties podcast. That's Good Evening Kitties podcast. GOODEVENING KIDDIES podcast. Each week, I'll review a new episode from the TV series The Tales from the Crypt. Find me on Podbay, Podbean, or iTunes. That's the Good Evening Kitties podcast. Check it out today.
Your appearance on our podcast is the beginning of a slow decline of...
Yeah, you can be like, what happened? They're so mad now. I think I'll recover somehow.
It's going to take some time, right? Hopefully not too much time.
No, I'll be all right.
So I'm going to get my boring interview questions out of the way first. Really, with we're not interviewers. Like typically, like when we have guests on our show, and we're really weird about like if they're in a band, we'll like have them talk about their favorite band instead of us talking about their stuff. So our we don't have much of an interview style. But I guess the first question that I had, and I've written nothing down, so was why. What was the initial spark? This urge of like, I want to explain new metal to people.
Well, I mean, I would say, man, I mean, if you want to break it down, really, is that, I mean, Jenny and I would talk about new metal all the time. I feel like one of the first times we met, like, I feel like Limp Bizkit came up within like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Seconds.
It was
just
like
15
almost
seconds.
Immediately we were talking about Limp Bizkit. So.
Yeah. And then just various things in our lives, and in, you know, we're both improvisers. Matt's an improviser too. But we would be doing shows or hanging out or something, and stuff would just come up. And I can think of, obviously, like a big moment was Jenny and I, with another guy, Joe, we went to see Limp Bizkit.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like a very last minute, you were at like Jenny was at a work party, right? Mm-hmm. And I texted you to come down because we thought we were going to get backstage tickets or tickets in some capacity because we got alcohol to a roadie. It's a whole thing. But that's basically cool. At the last minute, they were like, no, you can't because it's a dry tour. And so you were basically contributing contraband. And we're like, oh, okay, sorry. And then Jenny, you just like walked up to the box office and they just gave you a ticket, which was hysterical.
Yeah. Well, I used to work at the venue. It wasn't like I just walked up and was like, give me a ticket to this.
I was about to say, what year was this and how many tickets were still available?
Like in Teen Wolf, you just walk up?
I mean, it was maybe 3 years ago.
2014? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was sold out.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but we got in and it was very fun.
Oh, yeah. It was an incredible time.
And then go ahead, Lorin.
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, like we were down in the pit.
We were with the people. And it was 100% unironic enjoyment, which was really something that I turned around and I was like, everyone here legitimately loves Limp Bizkit. No one is here being like kidding. Like everyone here, like they would start a song and everyone would get pumped. And like, yeah, everyone was screaming at each other. It was the best time. Fred Durst went into the audience at one point and pulled out like a little kid and took his picture.
Wow.
Yeah. I was just going to ask you, am I imagining that there were children there?
There were children.
There were children there.
Yeah.
There were. Yeah.
All right, come on, little Susie, little Johnny. We're going to go see Mommy and Daddy's favorite band. Well, at least Daddy's.
That's someone's that's someone's first memory of being at a show.
Yeah.
Was Limp Bizkit. And then afterward, I don't even remember why we were standing around outside.
We thought we'd see Wes or Fred.
Oh, that's right. And then I was wearing heeled boots, and I tripped over a construction sign, and I fell on a curb, and I knocked my front tooth out.
Oh my God!
Come on.
And it was
rough.
It was pretty bad.
Yeah. Wow.
In spite of that painful story, who here is happy that Wes Borland is back in the band?
Oh, God.
This guy.
Everybody.
There is no band without Wes.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Yeah.
Because I like Big Dumb Face, but Duke Lion. Yeah, thanks for going back to Limp Bizkit, Wes. We appreciate it. Can you make more awesome music like $3 Bill Y'all?
So
for sure.
It's hard. It's been hard at first to accept it too, because like I'm definitely like more of a hipster when it comes to heavy music. So like, it's not, for the longest time, like it wasn't okay for me to like stuff like Limp Bizkit or even Korn or like
The Fifth Element, Third Strike.
Yeah, like all these bands that like clearly I listened to for hundreds of hours. But no, they suck. I can't do it because they're in this category, and that's really interesting about how nobody was enjoying it. Ironically, I would have thought in 2013 that that there would be people that were just like totally pumped for it, and people that didn't just come out for laughs. And but no, that's really incredible. So that was like I guess. Again, despite the painful story attached to it, I guess that was like kind of like a spark for you guys.
I'd say that, and then we did a show and an improvised show, and in the middle of the show there was like this bit about like the world had ended, and somehow we were talking about like in character talking about bands that we liked or whatever, and Korn came up. And then it just was always there, just always this thing. And then there had been multiple people, because in the improv community, everybody is always like, you should do a podcast. And I had done one years ago, but it was like, well, if we're going to do one, it needs to be something that people, or that I would be interested in, that no one else is doing. Which is an incredibly tall order to give yourself, but that was what I said. And because people like, I don't know, how many more, white guys you need talking about movies, I mean, there's those podcasts are out there. They're fine. So I read an article about Sepultura's roots on Stereo Gum, and they referred to it as the greatest nu metal album of all time. And I was like, okay, because one, I felt like I knew a lot about nu metal at that time, and I was like, I've never heard Roots, and I was like, how do they make that determination? Is there any sort of like, oh, these are the best albums? And I found like a bunch of lists, but they were all sort of like half-ass lists that just were the usual suspects and tend to be written tongue-in-cheek, like if the best of the worst, that type of thing.
Sure.
And so I went to Jenny and I said, what if we just talk about nu metal seriously, as serious as possible? And you said, sure.
I think that was my exact response was, sure. That sounds cool.
And and then we hooked up with Mr. Matt Naas, who initially was just like, I'll just run your board for you. But we slowly sparked something inside of him. And of course, he had this love of System of a Down. And then on top of that, just your music story, and just so many things that Matt Naas has brought to the show. And then, if your listeners have gone back and listened, it's kind of been an interesting, metamorphosis of how the show has grown and evolved. When I listen to some of those early episodes, I'm like, we are so serious about Deftones right now.
So serious. So locked in. Yeah.
And then I listened to, when I was editing the most recent episode that we just put up, and it's like all jizz talk. So, I mean, we've come a long way is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, boy. Come on, Lorin.
We've all been there, though. I mean, it happens.
Tundra.
If you've heard the things I've censored from Jeff, who's not here, yeah, we're almost there. It's almost gotten to that point.
Yeah, that Lost Prophets discussion we had got really bad.
And a buddy of mine asked if we were going to do him on the show, and I was like, no, not with that lead singer. And then he texted me later, and he goes, "Oh, I wish I didn't know about that." He didn't know.
Oh,
that
wow.
was me.
Know.
That was me. I had no idea. I'm like, when did that happen?
Yeah.
Thank God I wasn't aware of that. I've been listening to that record for a week.
R.I.P.
Yeah, that's rough. But yeah, that's so cool though. Like, I mean, I'm always interested in why people started podcasts, because like for years, I didn't start one because I just figured that there was a million people out there doing what I was going to do, or what I was thinking about doing. And then, really, whenever I look at it now, it seems more like there are a lot of interviewer podcasts where, you know, oh my God, I found the email address for my favorite band's bass player, and I'm going to interview them, and then they make connections, and they go, and they go, and they go. There aren't a whole lot of podcasts out there that are just kind of based around music criticism, which I think is tonight's topic, or that's what'll be on the show notes, is music criticism and how it applies to modern day. You know, because I hear a lot of people say things like, especially band members in interviews, well, you know, music reviews are a thing of the past and they don't matter and they have no impact on whether or not people like the music, and, you know, all this kind of things that you say maybe when you're about to drop an album that probably isn't going to go over well with people, you know? Yeah. And so it's interesting to hear all that, and I think the general populace has the same mindset in the era of digital music, because it's like I can listen to a band immediately and decide whether or not I think it's awesome or it sucks or whatever. And it's weird that like not very many people have that like middle ground anymore. And I feel like that's where the music reviewers kind of still are relevant, in the sense of like, if you're not sure, maybe run it past like a professional music reviewer. And so I guess my question to you guys is, do you think do you think that music criticism is relevant nowadays versus maybe a few years ago when you could only get it in like print magazine?
Who wants to start on that one?
Well, that's a tall order. That's a tall order of a question, but I don't know. I guess I kind of feel like it's as relevant as it ever was, in the sense that when you could only really get print, like anytime you could only get print criticism, you could only get physical copies of music. So as you're able to see like any sort of like a number of like people, like any asshole can have like a blog where they talk about, you know, whatever and review anything. Like by the time you get to that, you can also download a ton of music and stream it. So I think the same way that there's like just like myriad bands that you can listen to on any on any medium, it's the same thing with music criticism. It just like grows, and I think it becomes too much to actually take in all of it. So in the sense that like, are people taking it as seriously, or like, are there more respected sources of criticism? Those are probably pretty diluted, but it's also the same way that, you know, people aren't rushing to like record store on release day to get these like releases, because everything's just streaming or you can just steal it. So I think that also gets a little bit diluted. That sounded a lot more depressing than I meant it to, but that's my initial response. That's what I would say.
I would say the thing that is that I feel like there's this thought in the past that on a very base level, it's like, oh, is it good or is it bad? And it's like, I don't even need a critic for that. I can listen to it for myself. I have easy access. And I think that shortchanges criticism in that the good or the bad is kind of irrelevant. What does it mean for the career of the artist? You know, what does it mean on like a deeper level? It's like if you're just looking at reviews as like a consumer guide, unlike we bring him up on the show a lot, Robert Christgau. I mean, that's what he calls his reviews, the consumer guide. You can look at it in a way of like, is this worth my time? But if it's like an artist you like that you're going to listen to anyway, then it's probably good to read some criticism to see what other people think about it. How does it measure up, in their canon of music, in their career? I think the big thing is that we're in this weird sort of, I was listening to another podcast and they were talking about this sort of post-Dark Knight. Like, if you don't agree with my review, if your review is negative to the thing I love, then you're saying that I'm bad, and thus I cannot support that, and I hate you. And I feel like, we have this view of criticism that if it's criticizing a thing that you love, then it is also criticizing me as a person. And which certainly there are reviews that, go out there and say this is bad, and if you like it, you're a bad person, which are usually not great reviews anyway. But a lot of the time it's just, this is a take on art. And I think also with, if you guys are familiar with Poptimism, which is basically, this post-2004 thing where pop music was given the same level of critical clout as any other type of music. If we can, give that to pop music, then we can certainly give that to nu metal or anything else like that. It's all worthy of examination. Certainly, you can dig deep and find that there's nothing there, or there's not a lot there, or every song talks about semen, just to use an example from our recent episode.
Right.
But, that's, but as somebody, I consume a lot of criticism, like, reading online. I buy books all the time. I'm always reading that stuff. I've been reading Pitchfork since like 2002, I want to say, 2001. And I still check it every day. Don't always agree with them. Feel like maybe they've compromised a little bit since the Condé Nast purchase, but still, it's interesting to hear people talk about things. And Matt Naas.
One of the interesting things for me, and I'm going to agree with Lorin, is working in a record store, there wasn't a lot of time that I would go look for criticism of an album that I had right here. So it almost became like staff favorites were more important than any criticism that another source or outlet would have. Because when we were in there, and I know Jenny worked at a record store, you were the tastemaker. So it was, I hate that I just said that out loud.
Well, we were the tastemakers, man.
Well, we were the ringers of bells. We were the singers of songs.
That's why everyone in Detroit has such shitty taste in music. Because we were the tastemakers.
I put on big dumb face. Duke Lion. No, but because people would come in and they would say, like, I'm in this type of headspace. What do you have? Or, but I do see value in criticism, and it's almost more important now to have good critique because there's so much music. It's like, what I love about the internet is that it's open doors. Like, you have a podcast, we have a podcast, and there's so many podcasts. It's like layers on layers on layers. It's very difficult to understand which ones are the good ones, which ones are the ones that you should be listening to. So I feel like critique is even more important now, but it needs to be good critique that's kind of separated from, like, nobody's going to do it for free, but it almost needs to be like that. Like, you got somebody like the Needle Drop, Anthony Fantana on YouTube, who love him or hate him, and I have no opinion that I'll share. He is a guy who's trying to do an in-depth analysis on records, and he'll be like, nope, don't like this, or I do like this. But I just want to be in a place where I could trust someone in order to be like, their opinion is valid to me. Whereas like, I don't have that as much. When I read a review online, it's like, this is a faceless person putting this up here. I don't know if it's good or bad. And the only other times that I use critiques are if I'm completely out of the loop. So, Jenny and Lorin will tell you, I know so very little about metal that everything that I find out is like, just unearthing. Like, there's a what and how many? So how many cores are there?
Right.
So then, like, we did the episode on Suicide Silence, but there was such a visceral reaction to that record.
Yeah, nobody liked that
I had to read the reviews because I was like, I have no context at all for this band.
Yeah.
So that's when I would go back, and that's when a review for me would be like, oh, I don't know the 10-year history that this band was and that they had another singer. Like, those were things that the review helped me get to. I'm going to stop talking. I feel like.
No,
that was great, Matt.
Yeah, that was good stuff. Actually, and I'm going to jump off of that a little bit with context. Matt, you brought up context, and that to me is the one thing that I feel like makes music criticism valid. Really, during any era, whether it's print era or modern era. Whenever we did our episode on Sepultura, which was like 17,000 hours long because we did every record. And actually, that's not true. We got through all the albums with Max on them, and then we were like, yep, and then this record came out and it was okay, and this one came out and this one was okay. Because like I'd listened to each of them like maybe twice, like prepping up for the episode. And I actually read Max's autobiography, My Bloody Roots, and there's this podcast I listened to that recommended that I read that, so I did. And so one of the things that I thought was really interesting is whenever they went and recorded their very first demo, which I think was called like Bestial Devastation or something crazy like that, and they were like, they start playing. And the engineer's like, whoa, wait a minute. This sounds like shit, and they're like, no. This is what the style of music we're playing is supposed to sound like. And he's like, what? And so like they had to sit him down and show him like other bands that played music similar to what they were doing for him to even believe that bands were supposed to sound like that. That was their intent, was to sound that way. And
it sounds like a conversation I've had with you a few times.
Right. Well, but it's all context, right? So, like,
right.
The very first time I hear Napalm Death, I'm like, this shit is just, I literally had no point of reference for what I was hearing. So in my mind, and I would say the mind of most people, whenever you hear something like that, it's like, no, it's bad. I'm just going to push it off. It's bad. It sucks. And I think over the years of getting into, because I started with nu metal and I got into like a lot better, like a lot heavier stuff, a lot more extreme stuff. And there was this whole idea of like, I started developing this fascination with like introductory bands that like provide context. Like when you guys did the Demon Hunter episode about how like maybe there are people that heard Demon Hunter for the first time that didn't know that metalcore existed. And so they listen to a band like that, and then they hear a band like something like Killswitch Engage, and they're like, oh, okay. And then they're like, oh, well, what other bands like that? And before you know it, they're like, into, brutal death metal or something, like over a matter of years. And I think one of the things that I like about, because I read reviews constantly, I listen to podcasts that review constantly, and the one thing that I always like is when a reviewer is able to not just like genre drop, like a style, be like, this band is a deathcore band and they're really good at being deathcore and they do lots of deathcore-y things, and then you kind of come away from that, it's like, what the hell did I just read? Because you had no context. So I think like band comparisons and style comparisons and things like that are crucially important, because I think a lot of people have the potential to be into a type of music, but for whatever reason, because they never actually had that guidance or that understanding, that they kind of just push back from it. And it could just be me being wishful thinking and being like, the music I like is good, guys. You just need my guidance to.
Well, I've talked about that with Jenny and Lorin probably off mic a whole bunch. Like, I never liked nu metal. I was very much the guy who was like, this is garbage. It's awful. It's a waste of time. Why are people listening to this? I spent an exorbitant amount of time being like, Limp Bizkit's stupid. And now that I'm trying to get Jack's son, nothing's better to lift weights to than rolling.
That is a good workout song. I wouldn't know.
See, I would have said Nookie was a better choice.
Well, when you get in those dips going, then you got to get
right. Wow.
I'm going to take a nap after this. But one of the things that I've said a couple times to Lorin and Jenny is that this podcast the Roach Koach continually teaches me how subjective taste is. Because if the 2000 or the 1999 version of me was doing this show, I wouldn't be any fun on it. I would just be like, this is stupid. And I'm kind of like that in the first couple of episodes until I just got into that headspace of like, get over yourself, listen to what's going on here. Oh, you know what? This, when Sepultural Roots is playing, you're like, this is pretty fucking awesome. Like, holy cow, we are in this now. All right, let's have a Canyon jam. Let's do this.
Yeah, I think the first like stretch of time that we were doing the podcast, I think that we did come into it. I mean, I think that we had like probably our idea was to come into it and discuss it seriously, but I do think that we all brought our own thing into it. Like, I was like, how many times are you going to say, bitch, I'm coming for you? Lorin was like, I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. And Matt was like, this is all trash. And I feel like you can only maintain that hardline stance for so long when you really immerse yourself in something and you start listening to it so much. Like, I think that you just start to consider it differently. I don't really know what my point is other than to say that, like, we talk about, like you were bringing up earlier, how like, people like look at like nu metal like ironically, or people aren't really talking about it that much. Like, it's not like we came in and we were just like, all right, everybody, here's like this super like level-headed, reasonable, we're going into this with a completely open mind type thing. Like, I think we all brought our own shit into it, and it was just like that process of like, I mean, God, when we started this, I would listen to the album so many times.
I know.
Too many times. Mm-hmm. And I just think like after a while, this is probably going to sound weird because it seems like probably a lot of your listeners listen to more like what would be considered to be heavy bands that like people wouldn't be like, oh, you fucking listen to that, you nerd. Like,
you'd be surprised. We did Dead Z a week ago, so we're not. Oh yeah, we're not that cool. Yeah.
All right. Well,
we got the keys to Gramercy Park.
Yeah, I mean, when you have those
brand
keys,
new
what else
love.
do you
Come
need?
on.
But I have noticed recently that when I'm listening to things that are very much nu metal, whereas maybe 2 or 3 years ago, it would like hit me over the head, like, oh God, this is nu metal. Mm-hmm. It just sounds like normal music to me. And I don't know if that sounds weird or not, but I just think that like I've listened to it so much that it no longer seems like a huge joke to me, unless it really veers in a direction. Mm-hmm. That it would take like a Methods of Mayhem like level of something to like really take me to like, this is like a complete joke. It's just weird. Like when you hear it so much, it seems like I wouldn't even like bat an eye if I heard a song that sounded like nu metal now.
Yeah, that's the crazy thing about it too, and like it's that resurgence or whatever. We did this episode on Pantera a while back that was more or less like a comedic thing where I didn't like the band, so we capitalized on that in the most like ridiculous way possible. We had like Toomey come on and argue with me about it. We had like a whole bunch of people come on and argue about it, and I made bad, shitty arguments on the spot, and like it was so funny because now I'm known as the podcast host that hates Pantera, the metal podcast host that hates Pantera. And what's funny though is like, and like I just texted this to him to Josh Toomey the other day. I was like, as much as this is what I'm known for now, I had to listen to so much fucking Pantera to get ready for that. That like now when I hear it, I'm like, it's not that bad, I find myself, I'm like, I could dig this a little bit.
Yeah, our first episode when I like came in real hot at Korn, I had listened to that album like basically on repeat for a week and a half. By the time we got there, I was like personally mad at every single member of that band.
And after how long of a break? Like, when was the last time that you actually listened to the first Korn record before Roach Koach?
Probably 10, 15 years, you know?
Can you imagine?
I can.
I was about to say, when is it okay to listen to Korn again?
I mean, now it's fine. I feel like we went through, like, our bodies had to adjust to what we were doing. Like, our tolerance is high now.
Yeah, it is funny. Well, when we get some feedback where people are like, "Oh, I think you were too hard on this album," or "You guys didn't," you know, and I always want to be like, "Dude, we lived with this album for 2 weeks.
You bathed in it,
show." Yeah, like, I mean, I think it's in one of like the third or fourth episode when Jenny, you just sort of casually mentioned that you'd just been listening to the album on repeat. And I was like, wait a minute, how many times? And then I said I listened to it 3 times, and you got really mad because you're like, I listened to it like 20 times more than you have. And then, I think now, like, we're basically, we do 3 for sure. If we really like it, we do 4. I've only done that like 3 times. I think Disturbed, Roots, and Soulfly. I think are the only ones I've done 4. So...
Yeah, and like back to what you're saying about listening to so much Pantera, I mean, I think of it sort of like, and now you can hear a song, like, oh, it's not that bad. It's the difference between seeing somebody around and like being friends with somebody or like living with them.
Right.
Like, you want to set someone on fire when you live with them often because you're just like, it's too much. But if you just saw him around, you'd be like, greatest guy. What a guy. Love that guy. Should see him again soon. But if he lives with you, you're like, Chuck, get out of my room.
Chuck, you've had enough over here.
Yeah.
It's time to go.
Turn the TV off when you go to sleep.
How about that?
Because I can hear it.
It's a plasma. I'm not upgrading, Chuck.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's so funny too, is like getting used to it too. And it's weird because like the times that we've, and in your guys' honor, next year we're actually launching what we're calling New Metal May, where we're only going to talk about new metal bands the whole time.
Do I get to do that as the intro in the honor of the Roach Koach podcast?
Yeah,
we
why
present
not?
To you
Sure,
New Metal May by Discography Discussion.
Doom.
Whatever you want. No, I want everybody to think all my ideas are original. But no, but it's weird too, because like whenever I went back and was prepping for the new metal episode, and that was just for one episode, I was really taken aback at just like, because I listen to typically more brutal bands, but like I was surprised at actually how extreme some of the new metal bands were. That I was like, I really took a step back, because whenever I first started listening to like hardcore music, I really I kind of consider that music on a whole nother level, of extremity. Like especially with like more traditional hardcore music, where it was just all about energy. It's just like fast paced. Just in your face. And then you'd go back and listen to like a Primer 55 record. And it's like, God damn, these guys are just going so slow. And but then I would go back and I'd listen to even on the first Korn album, like there's like double bass on there that like I don't remember, and like just a lot of really punchy in your face stuff. And I don't know if it's just like my age that's connecting the dots or what, but I just would have never really saw it that way before prepping up for that episode. And I got to admit that I'm extremely jealous of you guys that you only have to listen to one album for 2 weeks.
This was all your idea, you know that,
It
right?
was, and it seemed like a good idea at first, because like our first 10 episodes or so were like bands that I was a huge fan of. So I didn't have to prep up for it, like I knew. And then we started taking suggestions from listeners or taking suggestions from other people, and it got so out of control. They'd be like, yeah, check this band out. Oh, how many records they have? I got 9. And I'm just like, okay. All right.
Yeah.
We'll get to that in 6 months.
Right. Jesus. Yeah. Well, that's why for 2018 I actually made a schedule. So like I put the bands with like really heavy discographies at the end of the year, so we'd have like months to prep up for it.
Yeah, you put it's a flag chart, and you're like, begin listening to How many albums does King Diamond have? I have no idea, but
I couldn't tell you offhand.
But if they have like
many,
20, I'm going to presuppose
several.
Are we counting Merciful Fate?
Jesus. Then it's like we're going to start in January for that episode in November.
Jesus. Yeah, like on Discography Discussion, we refer to that as a shit ton of albums. And it's just too many. Like, we're doing Napalm Death in June, and I don't know how I'm going to get through that shit.
My God.
Their albums are thankfully short.
That's true.
But short and to the point. There's one song that's only 1 second, so I got that going for me. But so like there's what we did, which was just like, let's do the whole discography. It'll be a great idea. Let's do it. And then a year later, we're like super jaded about it. So what was it? Was it like a main decision that you were only going to do one album per episode, or was that like is that like in the Roach Koach rules, or was that just something that you guys just kind of came naturally? You just were like, we're going to do one record this week, and then we'll do another record next week.
Yeah, I think initially the idea was, we would do one album at a time, because I think we realized early on that I was like, if we tried to do all of Korn, we'd have to sit down with, what at the time would have been 9 Korn albums, I want to say. How many? And they have 10 now?
10,
I think. Yeah. So that just didn't seem feasible. And then it just seemed like, just one at a time. We talk about it. We talk about our relationship with it. I mean, the thing is, early on, we saw a lot of these albums, Jenny and I had both grown up listening to. So we had, long histories, backstory of when we bought it, how young we were, did we listen to it at our grandma's house while skateboarding? Was that a lie? Those type of things.
Wow.
Nice.
And
put you on blast.
I mean, listen, I don't care.
Damn.
I lied about skateboarding at my grandma's house. I'll have all your listeners know about it too.
Slim kick.
And but now we're at a point where we are doing a lot of listener suggestions, and we don't. Sometimes our relationship to it is like, I saw that album cover once. That's all I know about it. And
going in fresh.
So I think in that it just seemed like, for practical reasons, we were just going to do one an episode. I think the initial plan was that each episode wouldn't exceed an hour, and that went away real quick.
It's impossible to do. It's impossible. You're going to always go over.
We had a band meeting, though, after the Suicide Silence episode, because that one was over 2.
Yeah.
And we were like, all right, hour 30 is when I need to, because I'm with the gear, I need to just make the symbol. We've got to wrap this up.
Right.
Land the plane, guys.
Yeah, and Suicide Silence was also the episode where I take the blame for that one. I kind of really pushed that one through because it was a Ross Robinson production, and I thought I had listened to it once, and I should have, I'd been doing the podcast for how long at that point? I should have, known my own rules that, that first listen is deceiving, you got to give it 3. And so I did one listen, and I was tweeting, this thing's fucking awesome, and everybody, it's new metal as hell, and you guys can't wait to do it on the show. And then we did it, and Jenny was shooting daggers, just like,
look,
why are we
I'm
doing
sorry. I think that's like our tradition is like Lorin loves something, and I'm like, Lorin, this sucks. And he's like, oh, the worst one though, I think was Machine Head. That was the worst time. I think Lorin was like, oh man, I love this song. I played it all the time in the announcements. It was really cool. And I was like, dude, Rob Flynn sounds like he's rapping in Teen Witch. And then we listened to it, and it was the same. And Lorin, his eyes, he always has a little twinkle in his eyes when he's talking about music, and the twinkle slowly faded. And I was like, oh no, I don't want to be the Grim Reaper of your joy.
I got over it. I recently listened to From This Day while driving around, and it's back. It's back. Just needed a little time. Mm-hmm. But the Suicide Silence one was also when we kind of made the decision that we were going to stick with prime era, 90s, 2000s new metal. And we weren't going to really do anything new unless it demanded it. Or if one of those bands came to my house and was like, put me on your show, then yes, absolutely. But otherwise, we're basically just keeping it to that classic era.
Can I make one suggestion from that era?
Absolutely, we love them.
Don't do it.
I'm gonna have to, Dan. Third Strike. It might even be on your list already.
Oh, not only are they on the list.
Oh, I think he's getting something.
Big thrifted, baby.
Yes!
Oh shit!
All right.
I think Joe's got it in our headphones right now.
Best new metal band ever.
This is one of my most ultimate big thrifts. If you guys can see, that's 99 cents.
Hell yeah!
Nice. Dollar
There you go.
bin.
No, you didn't get the edited version of that, did you?
Oh no, parental advisory stickers on it. Yeah.
Okay, good shit. Okay.
Oh, dude, these guys know I'm fine tooth comb on that stuff. When I got that Taproot,
Don't point at us. We didn't.
Sorry.
make you
I pointed
buy it.
first. I pointed
Okay.
first.
I pointed first. When I got that Taproot, and it was edited. That was like a dark day. I remember trying to convince myself it wasn't edited. I was so upset.
Or had PE's broke, where you can only find it edited right now.
That's rough. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
had
we-
to reach
You
out.
had to drop some new metal dimes, make
I
some
did.
phone calls.
I asked 2 people, and the first person I asked was like, "Oh yeah, I've got it. No problem."
I didn't say a lot of dimes.
No, I know. I love making it seem like I went out there. I was like,
She beat the bushes.
yeah, this dude I know will have it, and he did.
That's awesome. I typically buy new metal CDs from my local Goodwills usually. Up until about a year ago, I could get them for 99 cents, $2 or whatever. And at the time, I would just like take them and put them in like it was one of those like, yeah, I'm going to need a brown paper bag for these, you know, as I walk out the door with them. And
Those were your $20 days. Come out with 2 bags. Like, look at all this shit
dude.
I got.
Like it used to be awesome. And then, you know, now that everybody loves new metal again, it's like I could probably sell my collection and buy a new car. You know, like,
Well, there will always be a Kid Rock Devil Without a Cause wing
everywhere.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, that I don't know.
The last place I went to that had CDs, like a thrift store type thing, had like 20 copies in the
Jeez.
rack. I was like, all right, well, that's that annex.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think I didn't realize that people were starting to get into new metal again until it was probably a few years ago. And like Lorin said, that we do like improv stuff. So we're very involved in that. And like, there are some younger people who come to improvise. And so there were a couple people who were like in their like late teens who'd come around and take classes and stuff. And like started talking about like, have you ever heard of this band Limp Bizkit? Oh my God, they're so good. And I thought they were being really ironic, but they were very serious. And it's been like 20 years, you know? So I think it makes sense that it's time for that to...
Peak nostalgia.
Yeah. And the thing that I think connected people to it then was just like being pissed off a lot of times in a way that was this is like a vast generalization, but I think like it's more accessible than something like your more extreme forms of metal, and it's angry in a way that's like accessible and catchy. Like you're not gonna get hooks if you're listening to like death metal or grindcore. Like there aren't really hooks, you know.
Absolutely.
So this is a way for people to be like listening to something that feels heavy to them, that's like more angry than like your typical like alternative metal or like many kinds of punk. And it is, I mean, I guess, I don't know. It would be, I would consider it to be pop music. Like it's.
Well, we talked about this in '99. The chart was NSYNC, Korn, Britney Spears, Limp Bizkit.
Yeah.
It was like a battle
was
on
like
TRL every week. Yeah. Or every
In
day,
'99,
wasn't it?
I was in college and I was watching TRL every day, and it was like, and here's Orgy with Blue Monday. All right, and here's NSYNC with Bye Bye Bye. It's like, this is the weirdest time.
Right.
So isn't that something that I've only ever seen with new metal? And I don't bring this observation up often because he makes fun of me, but new metal really is kind of the heaviest pop music that we've ever had. And I don't really think there's another step beyond that. At least the singles that you remember from the 90s and the early 2000s, that's the closest that pop music's going to come to metal. Because the 80s, we had hair metal, but that was just a little bit louder rock songs with a little bit catchier lyrics. And then new metal was, you know, Fred Durst talking about faith, and Korn got the life. It snuck in, and nobody was really paying attention, but then we all kind of caught on, and it went back to being pop music again.
You really think that like bands like Under Oath and weren't considered like heavy pop music?
I don't think it was heavier. It was louder. They were screaming.
Yeah, I guess.
They were also whining.
You and I can argue about that later, but
maybe we will.
Well, my initial thought would be like, what's different from a band like a Limp Bizkit or many nu metal bands to something like an Under Oath? I think it was just more of like its pop culture, like as far as pop culture is concerned, like the impact that they had on the culture. Like I think that Under Oath has a huge following, obviously, but it's not like, I wouldn't consider it to be something that was like popularly followed by like a mainstream audience the way that I would think of something.
And nu
like
metal had different cosigns, like, you know, Method Man co-signing Limp Bizkit and being there, or, you know, other rap acts being like, oh no, this is cool, this is fine, these guys are all right. So it was like this blending of usually two styles of music that never ever go together, you know, and both fan bases tend to be against each other. It was, you know, take Run DMC and Aerosmith's Walk This Way out of it, and it was like one of the first times that like rap and metal, for lack of a better term, were coming together, and people really latched onto it.
Because that was always what Korn said with the Family Values tour was, our fans are the same, they just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
Because before that you had Run DMC, Aerosmith, and you had Anthrax and Public Enemy. So it was almost like they were clued in on something that the rest of us weren't paying attention to. It's like, oh, you mean that the energy in hip-hop is the same as it is in heavy music? Oh, you put that together? Hey, good idea, guys. I'm enjoying this.
They finally listened to Onyx's Back to Fuck Up.
Right.
Yeah. Damn, this is
nice.
hype.
Yeah. No, and to be fair, you're right. Like, I guess Under Oath really, I think their highest selling record was just gold, whereas some of these nu metal bands were like double, triple. I think it was like Slipknot's Iowa. Didn't that one go like 4 or 5 times platinum?
Well, that was Kid Rock's Hook, you know.
That would
9 times platinum.
Yeah, well, that would never happen with a band like Under Oath, you know, like. But I think that's also like part of where I was then, probably that year, is that it seemed like pop music to me because, you know, I'm listening to shit like Morbid Angel, and you know, like I'm hearing it, and all these kids are like, yeah, listen to all this really cool stuff. But like, I guess, if you look at it in terms of overall sales,
I totally know what you mean though, because when I think of Under Oath, I'm like, okay, swoop bangs, like get out of my fucking face, right?
Yeah.
But it's just, I don't think that that's like consumable on a mass level. Whereas something like somehow Korn, Limp Bizkit, I get. Like, that's the one nu metal band that I truly understand why it was like a mainstream popular band. Like, I feel probably because that's the one that I got when I was like 13, 14. I was like, oh, I get this. Yeah. Like, even though like I always thought I was never like super Fred person, but I was a super West person.
Sure.
And
he appeals to both crowds.
Yeah. I think so. But I mean, like when I think about like, I mean, and I love a lot of like bands that are much, much heavier than, you know, what we listen to. So I see what you mean. There are plenty of bands that I consider to be like, I did, especially when I used to be a huge dick about metal. Like, would not admit that I listen to nu metal.
I'm still there, so it's all good.
Yeah, you know what? I get it. I just think that like now, if I'm doing a podcast about nu metal and I'm improvising, like, I can't pretend like I'm cool or like like
it's hard to hang your hat on the cool peg, right?
There's like a level of like how many times you can do games where it's like, all right, guys, like let's clap and make a wacky noise, and then I'm gonna go listen to Stained 100 times. Like,
oh God,
I can't pretend to be cool anymore.
You're lucky to still be alive after that.
Hey, I'm doing all right, but I know what you mean about like feeling like bands like Under Oath or whatever would be more on the poppy side, because it's not. It is much more accessible than something like a Morbid Angel or like even like a Macabre or like something like that, you know, like that is something that you got to get pretty specific and listen to a ton of stuff, and like you got to dip your toes in the pool a bunch. So I don't know. My rant is over.
No, it's all good. I mean, I get it. Like this podcast has been really like, I started off, I think, more of a dick about metal, even though I thought I was like much better about it than I used to be. But like, it's really hard. I think what really broke me, I remember I was listening to your guys' episode on the sickness. And I remember there being this air at the beginning of the episode that like you guys were ready to shit on it. You know, like, or that was the impression that you were trying to give the listeners, that you guys were ready to shit on it. And you get about halfway through it and you're like, yeah, this is actually really fucking good. You know, like, and that, you know, paraphrased heavily, but yeah, like it was funny seeing that, like starting off of like, all right, I got my defenses up, you know. And it's interesting whenever you kind of just let go and you take things, you know, kind of for what they are and how they actually make you feel, like minus all the bullshit about whatever, you know. I mean, I guess at my age, I'm not like worried about what like other kids in school think about what I think about a band.
But subliminally, you're wondering what old you would think.
Yeah, would old me beat my ass? Absolutely. But like, I think, and that's really what opened us up, like, because we started off predominantly like we were doing like thrash bands and death metal bands and stuff at first, and then I don't know really when it happened, but like we've started being like, oh, I don't know if I want to call us a metal podcast, because like I want to talk about Dead Z next week, guys, or I want to talk about, you know, what's the most non-metal thing we've done, Joe? Is it Dead Z?
You know what? Just for the sake of argument, I'm going to say American Standards.
American Standards. There you go.
Yes, least metal band we've done.
Good buddies of ours. But I really found it like it's really been helpful to me as a reviewer to kind of see, like, you know, this whole like, how does it make me feel, and how does that relate to the actual person that might be hearing this for the first time, or might be reevaluating a classic, you know, like deciding if it's still cool or not cool.
That made me think of something, because like one of the first books I read about like criticism was Fargo Rock City, and I ended up, that was like 2001, I want to say, that was when I read that book. And I didn't know anything about Chuck Klosterman or they had read anything of it, but I was like, that book title's pretty funny, and I read it. And he was like the first reviewer, the first like critique person that I read, who was just like, here's how I look at albums. I only have, he says, some of money. I only have like $100 to spend on the records that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. So I just put a value on songs. Like, it's this crazy thing, but it's just like, how much money would you pay in order to hear that song again? Or if you don't pay the money, you'll never hear the song again. So he's like, Smells Like Teen Spirit might be worth $150 to me to make sure that I keep it, because I want to hear that song again. But In Bloom, that one can go. I don't need it. Like, it's this weird kind of, and I'm doing a really poor job of explaining it, but he really puts it like, Appetite for Destruction. How much is that album worth to me? What if the equation is you will never get to hear a single note of this for the rest of your life? It's like, oh, now he kind of shifted the balance on the importance of the record. Whereas like there's some things, like in '99, I was listening to a lot of goth industrial. Like that was the head, and probably a little bit more into the IDM, intelligent dance music thing. So like I was into bands like X Marks the Pedwalk and Apoptygma Berserk and Glow Sticks. Guys, I had wide pants. What can I do?
Who didn't?
Who didn't?
We all did too. The new metal fans, we had lots of. We had. I used to be able to fit a Sega Dreamcast in the pocket, the cargo pocket of the pants. Baby. Yeah, I mean, my God, like that was
left side 2 controllers, 3 games, all power cables. Right side was the Dreamcast. He reaches in his back pocket, he pulls out an N64. I'm like, Jesus!
You know what though? Nobody could ever say I wasn't ready.
No, you were ready for every LAN party.
I love it. I love it. So like back then in '99, I would have been like, these are the albums I'm keeping. I haven't listened to any of them in like 20 years. So
Oh my God.
Right.
The amount I would have spent on ska in 1999.
I would still spend some money on ska. I mean,
I mean, I would too. But geez, I'm glad that I didn't have to make that choice then.
5 Iron Frenzy? Yes?
Oh, yeah.
We know.
All right.
We know.
They're
Right
them
here.
and the W's saw them on tour.
just because they talk about new metal doesn't mean they're not woke. You know.
For the record, I still don't like ska. Just gonna throw that out there.
We know, Lorin.
We know. We know. That's why you're there and we're here.
All right, guys,
Yeah.
we're changing from now on to ska only.
Hey, discography discussion. Come on.
Ska. Okay.
Ooh, there you go. That I'm shocked that that's not a ska band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Discography has to be a ska band somewhere.
Who wants to
Yeah.
play saxophone?
All right. I don't know how, but I'll obtain one and just,
You just hold it and do kicks.
yeah.
There you go.
Right. Yeah, I can wear one really well.
Yeah.
Yeah, ska doesn't. I don't hate it. I like some of the rockier ska stuff, like the Urge, and but that's some people would say that's not even really ska, but fuck those people.
It's St. Louis rock is what it
Yeah.
is. And we love
That
it.
third wave of ska washed over Jenny and me pretty hard.
Sure did. Sure did. We were bathed.
We were bathed.
Truly bathed. What are you going to do?
That's awesome.
When you get a real big fish wave.
Oh,
hitting you.
when MU330 hits you, you're not going to be
When
able
the
to stand.
scatolites are happening.
Oh boy, yeah.
Well, I wish I had some kind of grand sweeping point that I was trying to make, wrapping all this up. But it's just always good to kind of kick back with other podcasters and try to just kind of compare and contrast styles and kind of get an idea of where everyone's get an idea of where podcasting is going, and are we behind you guys in what we're doing? Are we ahead? No, not like that, but
You're probably ahead.
They've had improv training. They're ahead of us.
Yeah, they're definitely
I
ahead of us.
assure you of that.
Dude, when they started recommending books, I was like, holy shit, Joe, these guys are way smarter than we are.
I've been trying to get you to
did
do
read the
improv
book,
for years.
right?
Yeah, right.
We didn't read straight ahead book.
Yeah.
How did you guys get approved on iTunes if you didn't read the book? Yeah, it's Cliff Notes.
There's cliff notes on that book.
No, there's not. But no, I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your regular recording schedule. I know it's probably hard for you guys being separate now. I'm a huge dick about that. I never let our third host Skype in or anything. I'm like, everyone has to be in the same room.
They're very accommodating for me.
Yeah, Lorin, how dare you?
I
Well,
know.
I remember when Lorin said that he was going to, we started working on how to make it. I've never done a mix minus out from my board until he moved. And I was like, all right, how do I do this? So we figured that out. And then it was like, all right, I'm going to record my side. You'll record your side and I'll record everybody together. And then Lorin figure it out from there.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
A lot of fun trial and error, but we're pretty much, we've had enough people tell us that they didn't know that I'd moved, that I was like, okay, then it's working.
It doesn't. Yeah, I was gonna say it doesn't sound like it on the podcast. And I'm nitpicky as shit. Whenever I got your email saying that you're like, well, I'm in Indiana now.
First thing that happened.
I was like,
he
he's
calls
recording
me.
he's recording his audio onto his computer and sending and mailing it over. That's the only way it could sound that
Yeah.
good.
Well, I was listening to a music writer podcast called No Plus Ones, and I've been listening to it for about a month or two. And then one of the guys casually goes, Nick, you're in New York and I'm in LA. And I was like, wait, what? Stop right now. Because I had no idea. I was like, and they sounded, they must be using $100 mics. Yeah.
Are you guys getting stoked up about having to do an ICP review? Because it's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like
I'm ready.
I'm
I'm
ready.
I'm
I
ready.
have spent a majority of my life bagging on ICP.
I hear you. I hear you, man. I hear you.
Unrelentingly making fun of them. And then this show happens, and I actually meet people that love ICP, and they're so awesome.
You don't
And
hate
they're
them?
so-
Yeah.
They're so nice, and they're like, oh, we get it, but you don't. And I'm like, oh, man, all right.
I make fun of ICP until I remember how many times I've listened to The Great Malenko in my life. I wish I could say it was less than 50,000 because it's been on repeat for a few years. I'm not going to lie.
Great Malenko. Yeah, I'm getting ready, man. I don't want to be a Nedenhole. I think that's...
Don't be a Nedenhole. Yeah, you know what? Like, I think if anything, this is very cheesy, but like doing this podcast has definitely made me a lot more like open and chill about what other people like. And in retrospect, I'm like, who the like hell did I think I was to be like, oh, you like fish, you suck. I'm still like, how do you listen to that much fish? Like, but it's from a place of curiosity more than it is like a judgment. Mm-hmm. So equipped with that newfound wokedom, as I think you said we were woke, which I don't know.
I've never said that. I've never said that word in that context before in my life. I just thought I'd try it out.
We're new metal woke.
We're new metal woke. Yeah, but I am actually looking forward to listening to ICP in the same way that we have been listening to new metal, because it's I don't know, I almost feel like we're in Matt's shoes of having to give it the benefit of the doubt.
Yep.
Yeah, because that's the thing we didn't mention. I do not listen to the albums. Every episode, it is my first listen, hearing everything.
Okay. That's so awesome.
Those are like, and I like that because it's like my first takes when Jenny and Lorin know exactly where the song's going to go. And there's a couple times where for anybody who's not listening to Roach Koach, please give us a try. But one of the features of the show is that we will play significant portions of the beginning of the song. And when the song starts, and this happened like maybe 3 or 4 episodes in, I just started circling my finger in the air and I'm like, this one activates the pit.
Right.
And now it's a thing. Now it's like straight up a thing where it's like, does this song activate the pit? Or does it stoke the pit?
What do you want the pit to do?
Or does it not do anything?
What do you want to pit the... Yes.
I just listened to the Taproot one the other day because we just interviewed the drummer from Taproot that was the drummer on that album. And I was like, I wonder what the Roach Koach had to say about this record.
Please never tell them anything we say.
No. I think I did the interview before I listened.
They can drive over and kick my ass.
Well, yeah, it's funny is I had originally contacted him to see if he wanted to talk about Limp Bizkit with us. And he's like, no, we're talking about Metallica. And I was like, all right, fits our format better, but yeah. So we ended up talking about Metallica with him. But I was really like, man, Limp Bizkit, we could break the mold. It'd be the first time we ever even really mentioned Limp Bizkit on Discography Discussion.
It's also the first time it's been played.
Yeah. So we it was just really funny to hear that reaction of like, what do you... And it's weird because I loved that album, Gift, because it was one of those I bought it when it came out years and years and years ago. And I remember thinking like it was so great because there was so much different shit going on. It was one of those like master of none kind of things where they tried a lot of different stuff, but they never necessarily excelled at any of it. And I just thought that was really interesting going back and listening to it again and being like, yeah, you know what, this is a little too all over the place, I didn't mention any of that to him whenever we went on with it.
I don't see it going over well.
Yeah. We were like, you're great, your band's great, we love you, all that. Which is all true, of course, if this portion ends up in the podcast. Because Joe will take this conversation and he will hack it and slash it to the point where we all sound amazing. There's no awkward pauses. I mean, it's just...
I am the enemy of Skype latency.
Yeah.
I did have a question because I listened to a few episodes before we came on just because I wanted to make sure that I knew you guys.
That explains the extra 300 downloads.
That explains why. Yeah. Okay.
How many times did you listen to the Megadeth episode?
Oh, I never stopped. Yeah. Hello, me. It's me.
Right.
Oh no, multiple Dave Mustaines. Don't.
Jesus Christ.
You just be glad Josh isn't here. There'd be at least 5.
But I did have I listened to the System of a Down episode, which
I wasn't on that one. My wife is having a baby.
Smart man.
I was like,
what the hell?
And then I listened to the Tubi episode, and I was like, all right, everything's cool. But you in that episode, Joe, you talked about sequencing kind of being a lost art.
Yes.
And we talk about sequencing a lot on the show because we think it totally can make or break some albums where it's like, why is this record so bottom heavy? It's like all the fast songs are at the end, or all the heavy ones are at the end, or it just becomes ballad central at the end of it, or it tools out. And we're like, no, what are you doing?
23 minutes later.
I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts because I didn't get the whole picture. Like, where did that come from for you?
The first record I ever listened to was Let It Be by the Beatles, courtesy of my mother. And for as random and cut up as that record ended up being, now that I'm older and I know the story of the Beatles and that they were basically just hanging out in a room together trying to get that done so that they could stop being a band because they hated each other, or at least, John and Paul had their little tiff going on. That and Abbey Road, for me, are the templates for how an album works as a whole. Yes, it's important that I hear the single. Yes, it's important that I hear the other good songs on the record, but sometimes you can kind of sneak some stuff in that maybe doesn't fit or doesn't really have a purpose other than to take up space. But as a whole, you're supposed to be listening to a journey. That's the point of hearing a record. It's supposed to be a journey. It's supposed to be a story. The best albums that I've ever heard give you an emotional response from beginning to end. And all stories that are based on the Shakespearean version of story, I'm bringing up Shakespeare on the podcast, they're supposed to start, they're supposed to peak, they're supposed to break, and then they're supposed to resolve. And sometimes the resolution is a tragedy. I said all that to say this. When I listen to a record, I try to take it all in. And even with System of a Down, and with rock music and modern metal at that time, I feel like what we had as a storytelling tool was tempo. It wasn't necessarily the heavy song leading into the slower song. I've heard every band that was famous in the early 90s and the late 80s talk about the metal ballad was always track 3. Your first track was your opener, your second track was your single, and your third was your ballad. So that gave me this idea that records could start fast, start full, and then they kind of resolve. And I always started sequencing records when we had our band End of Destiny. When everybody was walking around at the end of the session talking about, oh, this is going to be the track listing, I just kind of sat there and said, no, it's not. And then they'd come at me and it's like, so this is how we're going to lay the record out. And all I said was, that just does not make sense. And I don't really know why I feel the way I do about it, but it's really important to me that something goes somewhere. It either slows down and then speeds up. He's been telling me as long as I've known him, you can't have a slow song without having something fast. So no, it doesn't matter how fast you play. If you don't have a slower song next to it, it doesn't, there's no release. There's no relief. There's no stepping off the gas. Yes, you can put your foot to the floor and you can go 120, but eventually you're going to run out of gas, and what's the point?
I think all I said was that a band shouldn't blow their load on the first song within the first 30 seconds. Like, let's say, if their goal is to be extreme, don't be as fucking extreme as you possibly can be right away. Don't you want to build up to that? Like, get people 7 to 8 tracks in, and then you hit them on a completely different level than you did before. Like, just kind of keep everyone guessing. I think his explanation with the Shakespeare and all that is a lot more refined, but like it is like album sequencing is so
it's a lost art.
It's so important. Yeah, like people really, I feel like, especially in the digital age where we're kind of in the age of songs, not the age of album.
Right, we're back to singles culture.
Absolutely,
kind of, in a way.
Yeah, and really sometimes sometimes you can hear a song and think it's great, but it be completely out of context from the rest of the record. And if you listen to the song before it and after it, you might come away with a completely different perspective on it.
And actually, singles culture is the best explanation I could possibly give it, because singles, way back when, it was give us your 25 cents and we're going to sell you the next 4 minutes of your life. Albums were give us $5 and we're going to give you the next hour of your life. And now we're back to singles, where you don't have to buy the whole record. You don't have to get the 7 songs that you don't like with the one that you like. You can just buy the song that you want for 99 cents. And everything's a playlist now.
Yeah, but I think there is the counterpoint to that, where even though it's definitely not in the metal genre, that hip-hop is, in a lot of ways, the artists in hip-hop are at least trying to take some of those things and make full albums. I mean, I think a To Pimp a Butterfly is a good example of that, where it's like, whether you like the music or not is not what we're talking about right now, but I think that narrative arc that he put in there is what they were doing, what we were seeing at the end of the 90s and into the early 2000s with other artists. But yeah, it's just fewer and farther between, because it's like, I'm going to make it because I put this song on SoundCloud, and then SoundCloud gets big. But like Coloring Book probably has, Chance the Rapper's last album has a narrative to it too, but it's onesie twosie, instead of like, we had a period where it was like almost every artist, this is the way that you were thinking about music. And this is the way that you were thinking about it and the way that you were laying it out. That when you revisit things from that time that didn't get it or didn't get it right, it really, really stands out.
Big time.
Yeah, which is why I think albums like To Pimp a Butterfly get called out so much, or because it's like, oh my God, they're doing the thing we all love. That arc that you're talking about is the thing everybody loves. It's innate in us, That's the hero with 1,000 faces. That's what we want. We want to see that journey. We want that. If I don't get denouement, if I don't hear the resolving note, I feel like, what is it? It's because it's part of my DNA, where it's like, that's what I expect in my music, is like, we hit the G and then we go to this note, whatever the right one is, that resolves it. And I'm now just
that would be a B flat. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dun, 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 dun.
It's something that has gone away for a period of time, and it'll be back, because it always comes back, and that's storytelling in art. And it kind of, where we lost it, we're starting to see it again with movies, because filmmakers are taking things more seriously. And music, we're back to singles culture, where it's okay, yes, you realize your business is how many dollars can you get from insert number of thousands of people, where before it was, if we can get $10 out of people, we've made our money. But then, unfortunately, people started stealing music. And what that proved was, if you can make it available to me, I'll be happy to pay you that 99 cents for that one song that I downloaded 17 times.
$10 a month, man. Spotify, right. Stuff like that. This podcast would not exist without services like that, because it's not like I have every album, that's ever been made. Right. It's really weird too, because of however I may feel about that, like what that's doing to music or what it's not doing to music. It's one of those things where it's not really it's a necessity for me to keep doing what I'm doing. So it's kind of that selfish, like, yeah, I know it's destroying music and screwing over my favorite artist, but I don't care because I got to go do my thing over here. Yeah, I went nowhere with that, but
you guys have mentioned that you all do improv, so please, for his sake, answer this question. Do you think that improv makes you a better reviewer? Does it make it easier to explain an abstract thought that you might have? Like, I can't put into words why I like Between Angels and Insects. It's groovy, it's heavy, but I can say those words 17 times in 1 minute. Does improv make it easier to be on the spot?
I like that we're taking as long as possible to answer this question as great improvisers.
Who wants to go first?
I mean, I don't know if it necessarily, I feel like, let me think on this. I mean, I feel like I've always been opinionated about music and my thoughts on it, and doing my best to explain why I like something beyond just saying it's good or it's bad. So I don't know necessarily improv. I don't know, it excelled that or anything like that. I mean, Jenny, what do you think?
I think that spending as much time improvising and like doing written shows as I have makes me maybe a more empathetic reviewer, because there are a lot of times that I'll be listening to something and I'll be like, I see where you were trying to go with this. I think it didn't quite land that way. Or I just think that it helps me to have more respect for the amount of time and effort that it takes to create something, and how even with best intentions and very talented people, and I'm not necessarily including myself in that, but I know a lot of people who I consider to be very talented, who've worked very hard on things that frankly aren't good. And I've abso-fucking-lutely been terrible many, many times. So I think it sort of helps me to approach things that maybe didn't work out well, or I don't necessarily like. I'm not coming in hot, like, this sucks, you suck. It's like, I think I see what you were going for here. It's not quite that thing. Before I started improvising and actually creating things, I had a lot more of a harsh, hot take on a lot of stuff. So that's the way that it impacts me.
I think for me, where the improv helps is when we're listening to something and we don't know what to say about it. We'll sometimes create the character, and I know that they'll support it, that would like this type of music, or that would appear when you're listening to something like this. Like Prowler is a character that we have on the show who lives outside of the bushes of Jenny's house. And I forget the first time that he appeared, but it was just like a slinky bass line was playing, and I was like, oh yeah, baby, I love it. And it was just like, because I think Lorin said something about this sounds like somebody's going to break into your house. And I'm like, it's me, the Prowler.
Yeah, generally whenever I'm writing my notes for a given album, I'm generally trying to not just say the same thing every time. So I'm trying to think of how does this new sound? We've been lucky enough that we keep encountering things that we're just like, this is a complete surprise. I did not expect this to happen. And I, think of some new way to describe some sound. I'm writing about any type of music. I feel like the dancing about architecture line is always going to be very true. We've kind of created our own vernacular on the show with, smooth boys and everything like that.
Sturdy
riffs and crunchy guitars. And we're just trying to, be as illustrative as possible when describing, what sometimes feels like is, undescribable.
Yeah, those were good answers.
Okay. All right. Great.
No, for sure.
Victory.
Yeah, you've got the discography discussion stamp of approval.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, guys.
But
it's the prestigious stamp of approval.
Okay.
You got to use all the words.
Well, yeah, that's interesting too. Yeah, having to. First of all, I love the characters, but seriously, I mean this with total respect. Fuck you guys for coming up with Activate the Pit, because now literally every single time I'm listening to a fucking song and it starts getting real intense, I hear one of you guys in my head just go, activate the pit, and I'm like, fuck.
I think credit must be given to Scott Vogel. I think he said activate the pit in earnest, and then we just sort of lifted. I'm pretty sure. Or Matt Naas. We're gonna have to get them to fight about it.
It has ruined my life in the best way possible, but because it wasn't something I was paying attention before, because it was like, I like heavy bands and it's heavy. It's supposed to be heavy. What the fuck do I care? But then I started thinking about it, like, man, I never thought about it like that before. But like, man, right here, this band's really kind of half-assing it. Like, it started off strong, and now it's Now it's not. Now they're just like, how do we fill up 2 minutes before we can do that again? Because if we just do the same thing again, in a 30-second loop over and over and over again, then, we'd be madball. But no, it's like, I just, oh my God, I can never get that out of my head. And luckily, I think we've avoided catchphrases so far, haven't we, Joe?
Absolutely not. We've got cat stranglers.
Yeah, cat stranglers for thrash metal solos.
We've got we've got professional Metallica comparicists.
One of our first hosts, Josh, he literally could compare any band, no matter how different of a genre it was, to Metallica in some way, shape, or form.
I spent a long stretch of the first, I think if you go to like the first 30 or so episodes, nearly every episode I would find a lyric and be like, is this a sadomasochistic relationship? And then Jenny would go, I don't think so, but one day it'll happen. And then I think we found, like, there was some album, and I was like, you guys, and I think Jenny was like, yeah, I think you're right. This is the one.
Finally happened for you.
And I don't think I brought it up since, because I think I was just looking for that one.
Right.
So
once you find the one.
That fire got extinguished.
Special moment. Yeah.
Yes.
It's that obscure quality assurance question that you always have to answer at the very end. Is this the sadomasochistic relationship? No.
It's definitely how I judge all of my lyrics.
Finally, is this really, do I have to say yes? Okay.
Lorin would sometimes be like, is this a sadomasochistic relationship between a boy and his dog? Like, you brought some like weird left field ones in.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
but you don't know.
It was like total like whatever, like parents coalition, like that put the parental advisor, everything, and they're like,
here's your chick tract, and let's talk about.
He's like, I'm not so sure. I'm pretty sure this is. If you play this backward, it's about.
I mean, we've definitely earned the label of your new metal parents. I mean, that's 100% earned.
Yeah, there's definitely an oh my to some of the, but
clutching my pearls.
Oh my goodness,
constantly.
They do not seem like nice boys. Yeah, but one thing that I really do also enjoy about the show is that, like, your guys' actual giving a shit about the lyrics. Because I can't tell you in heavy music in general how much of a shit nobody gives about the lyrics. And that's, I think it's cool that you guys actually like read, portions of it or discuss what you think the songs are about, because I think that's like really missing from a lot of, because to me, Pantera is a prime example. The song might be cool as hell, but if he's talking about like, I fucked your girlfriend last night, like, I don't know, like it changes the entire dynamic of it.
Well, I think early on that was also, we kind of needed to dive into the lyrics, because otherwise we'd be like, hot riff, next track,
Right.
And so
that's a real smoker.
Oh yeah, another hot one for my boys. And I think early on, really, Jenny, you were going to, it was even pre-songmeanings.com. You were going to azlyrics.com.
Yeah.
That was your early one. And then you found Song Meanings, and then we found this amazing community of people who existed largely in 2002 to 2005, who would get in arguments and discuss, seriously.
Very heavy arguments, yeah.
Oh yeah, intense arguments about the lyrics on Iowa, and and they all have incredible screen names. And Cornfucker 666. All right. So I feel like the going back to the show and the criticism, I think a lot of the time it was like, these bands are dumb, their lyrics are dumb. And I can tell you, in the when I got out of college, I was listening to like a shit ton of indie rock. Mm-hmm. And every now and again, you go and you listen to some of these bands who are like, beloved and have like a high cred of, with, tastemakers, as it were. And I'm like, lyrically, there's not a lot here. why do these guys get a pass? And so when we started doing the show, it was like, well, let's see, are these lyrics abhorrent and juvenile, as they say? And sometimes they are, and sometimes they surprise you.
There was a song on there called Faggot. Yeah. It's like,
yeah.
What do you do with that?
Yeah. There sure was.
It's a slog sometimes.
Just got to power through it every now and then.
Which is funny because if you listen to our Korn episode, you hear like 5 minutes of me defending that song and about how it wasn't as bad as you think it was.
I mean, we've I think it's I don't know, maybe we've just luckily gone through a lot of really super offensive albums, but I feel like we haven't had I feel like it's been a few episodes since we've had a song about like murdering a woman and burying her somewhere. Like it's been a little bit, right?
No, it's not been that long.
You need to start listening
It hasn't been that long.
You need to start doing screamo bands. You'll be fine.
Oh boy, yeah. I was actually very surprised because like a lot of like the more popular bands were a lot worse about their treatment of women than the less popular bands, generally speaking. So I kind of expected that it would just be like non-stop. And as it turns out, like, I think a majority of the bands, like lyrically at least, I don't know about their like actions in the world, but like lyrically, it's more about like being angry and people wronging them. It's not like specifically, like you are a bitch. You like whatever. So that was kind of a pleasant surprise for me. And also like we, hear from our listeners a lot, and I've only been called a hole once.
One time.
Generally speaking, people have been very like respectful. So
was that the
like,
iTunes
sort of
review?
Yeah, I love that it's still like the top one is like, I hate the hole.
Well, it's wrong. It's simply wrong too. They don't even know who the hosts are. They mix your guys' names up. Because I always check it every now and again to see how close to 100 it is. And like, it's like, holy shit. And then I check mine and I'm like, fuck, we're nowhere near 100. But like, it's
promise them that you'll talk about ICP's.
I know, right? Apparently that's the secret to success, right? Like,
yeah, you can race and see who gets there first.
Right. Oh my goodness. But yeah, that was and it's weird too because I expected like when I went in and read because I read iTunes I read reviews for fucking everything. It's like I'm obsessed with reviewing, reviewers, like all that stuff. And so when I was reading through that, I expected there to be a lot more meathead in it than there actually was. Like there's a few notable examples, but like yeah, for the most part, it's one of those like, man, maybe I judge these new metal people a little too harshly. Like they're actual real life people just like me and you.
Yeah, I think and I know we've been going for a while here, but like I think most of the meatheads like left and moved on to other things.
Moved on to Hatebreed. Yeah.
If you're still listening to new metal and you still care enough to like listen to a podcast that is 2 hours of like 3 people in a basement talking about an album song by song, you're probably not just some like thoughtless dickhead bro. Like those guys are.
They've moved on to way other things.
Yeah, they're doing something else now. Yeah. So, but I was surprised because that was like that's what I thought too. I was like, I better brace myself because whatever I say, I'm going to hear about it. And I was wrong. I'm glad to say I was wrong. Look, I don't really. It's all been very respectful disagreement, which is something that we like to say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we talk about that a lot, and I think Lorin was about to take it, so I'll give it over to him.
I mean, I think when we first started the show, I remember Jenny saying to me, like, I'm not going to read anything online, and I'll let you handle all of that, and we'll, because things could get toxic just because of how things are. And I think early on, anytime we'd get a post or a comment and stuff, it was like, oh, how's this going to go? But we've kind of really set a tone of like Matt was saying, like respectful disagreement. Like, sometimes we're gonna not like something that you love, and but we don't hate you. It's it's all good. We want to hear from people, and I think everyone's responded to that. And we don't have fights in our comments. We don't have people sending vicious stuff because we didn't. I mean, here's the funny thing: when people don't like what we've said about a band that they love, they just stop listening and we don't hear from them ever again, which is what happened after the 311 episode.
Yeah.
Some people
Really?
wouldn't listen anymore. Yeah.
Huh. Hey, Joe, don't listen to that episode.
Some people that we personally know
He'll
who
delete
we're
this
friendly
one,
with
yeah.
were like, you were too mean to 311, so good luck, but we're not going to listen anymore.
As a fan, they're too easy to be mean to. Again, as a fan, when you really sit there and listen to it, or like me, you watch the 5-hour DVD that they did for their 20-year anniversary, or however many years it was, I looked at it and I said, everybody in there is high. No wonder they think this is awesome.
They're hearing something way different than we're hearing.
They're not hearing what I hear.
Everybody's got their thing, man.
That's right.
Go nuts. Go
The
nuts.
counter is at an hour and 41 minutes.
I'm not looking at the counter. I'm looking at our prestigious guests.
Well, I'm looking at both. They're on the same monitor.
And this beer.
Yeah, we're the beer podcast. We're like, if you ever are just literally so bored and lonely that you decide to listen to an episode of Discography Discussion, you can definitely hear the episodes where I've had like 4 or 5 like 9% IPAs like by the end of it, and it's like it turns into total pandemonium, and I can't even believe we still have people downloading after those. I was like, maybe we should put our beers away. Like, I don't see a beer on any of their stuff, any alcohol.
Don't let that stop you.
Oh no, we were drinking pretty good for a while there. I know. I went back and listened. Like, I'm pretty drunk on the first Slipknot episode, and
I'm
Jenny
drunk
and I
on the Kid Rock episode.
Yeah,
I'm just straight up drunk, I think, on the Kid Rock episode.
Well, I don't know if you guys are like me, but this is the only fun thing I do anymore. So it's like literally one of those, like, this is the only night that I'm not, because I've got 3 kids, so it's like,
oh wow,
like,
congratulations.
Thank you. But
I'm expecting my first, so I'm.
Oh, that's awesome.
Thanks, man.
Do you know if it's a boy or a girl?
I'm gonna be surprised.
Awesome. We wanted to do that, but like I am not, like I'm too much, like I can't, like I have to know everything. Where was I going with that? Oh yeah. So this is the only fun thing I do during the week. So when I get here, some nights I'm like, guys, we're gonna put on a really professional show tonight. We're gonna impress planet Earth in general. They're people that didn't even listen to metal before are now going to become metalheads because of the great words that we've said tonight. And then other nights I'm like, so this album just sucks in comparison to the other one. I mean, what were they thinking?
Sounds like in flames all over
You were
again.
there. What were they doing? What guys were you doing?
Yeah. Right.
I mean, that was like the power with which I came at Kid Rock, was just like not liking it to begin with, but also being drunk. I'm like, oh yeah, Kid Rock, you stupid fucking asshole.
He's a piece of shit. Yeah.
You're blowing bubbles up anybody's butthole. Like, I don't even remember if that was the same album, but
that's it. That's the same album.
I feel you. I think we've all had our
a little too toasty.
Yeah,
right.
We've all various levels, flying close to the sun there.
Right.
There's music reviewing, and then there's let me tell you what I really think.
Oh, geez. Well, I really appreciate you guys taking your time out, because it definitely made my night. And if anybody that's listening to this has not heard the Roach Koach podcast, I mean, what the hell?
Yes, what the hell?
What the actual hell? You can actually find them under Roach Koach if you go on iTunes. Are you guys are on all the major platforms, aren't you?
Yeah. We're not on TuneIn yet because I haven't talked to Lorin about it, but I think we're on everything else.
TuneIn Radio is really cool because you could actually tell an Amazon Echo, Alexa, play the latest episode of Roach Koach podcast, and they'll do it.
That's awesome.
Did you really just steal my plug?
Yeah, that's our plug.
You son of a bitch.
Every eepisode we're like, if you ask Alexa to play the latest episode of Discography Discussion, she will. So TuneIn's awesome. But you can find Roach Koach anywhere you find podcasts. and Google's also a thing. Definitely, if you're a Discography Discussion fan, definitely if you like what we do, you're gonna definitely love what they do.
Thank you very much.
And thank you so much. We're all we didn't want to jump on it because we know how Skype works with that. But thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us on. This was super fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely our pleasure. So,
you guys ever want to come back and talk about a new metal band in its entirety, don't be afraid to let us know.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll be there.
Or we can recap. Like here's my idea. We can recap like the first time you get through a band's discography over the course of the show. That's whenever you come on here and recap with us over the whole thing.
Ooh.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. We'll be back on to talk about all those cold albums.
You motherfucker!
Oh shit! I think my wife's having a baby. I gotta go.
Oh, where's everybody going?
The room just empties. We'll leave the recorder on, guys.
I have to go.
Oh my god. Fucking cold.
Jane just flushed herself down the toilet.
That's so weird. Yeah, you wouldn't think a human body could just go, but there I go.
Okay.
Bye.
All right. It also doesn't help that you look identical to our friend Mike, so there's that.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, again, what the hell?
Mike was at the last meeting of balding guys with beards. So.
Oh my god, dude. I gotta stop drinking.
This has been episode 38 of Discography Discussion. Thank you for listening. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Discussmetal. Subscribe to our podcast everywhere you listen to podcasts, including Google Play, iTunes, and Stitcher. Visit Discussmetal.com for all things discography discussion, and please send questions and comments to danandjoeshow@gmail.com. If you are not a patron, you can become one at patreon.com/Discussmetal. We have some sweet perks. Roach Koach can be found at gabbermedia.com/Roach Koach. That's Coach with a K for all you grammar fanatics. You can also find them on Facebook and on Twitter at Roach Koach and on all major podcasting platforms. Thanks, guys, for hanging out with us, and we will be doing this again very soon. See you in the future.